Hi everyone, welcome back to Demands Decoded. I'm Dan Stilgo, Marketing Manager at Blend, and I've got another solo episode for you today. Now, this is something we've probably all thought about and heard and seen lots of thoughts and discussions about over the last kind of 3 to 6 months, even more so at the start of this year, and we'll touch on why that is quite soon. And that is SEO still worth investment? Is it still worth your time and money, essentially, as a channel? And with all marketing channels and investments, we obviously have to constantly evaluate their effectiveness and the ROI we're getting from them. And SEO is no different. You know, just because search has always been around and been a reliable source of pipeline for many businesses for so many years now, it doesn't mean that it's always going to be that way. And we have to ask the question, ultimately, is it still a channel that is still worth our time and investment? So in this episode, I'm going to cover off if SEO is still working and if it's worth your time and effort going forwards. This podcast is brought to you by Blend. We're a B2B website and demand generation agency. We work with ambitious businesses just like yours to create and execute effective demand generation strategies that drive pipeline for your business. We also recognize that your website is the most important asset you have in marketing. So we specialize in building scalable websites on HubSpot that convert the demand that you've created. If you want to find out more about our services and see real results that we've generated for businesses, visit blendb2b.com. So firstly, just want to cover off why this discussion even matters. And I think you'd really have to be living under a rock to have not heard some of these things and to have not even asked yourself the question if SEO is still worth investing in. So obviously, we've had AI. AI has come and blown everything out of the water over the last 2 years, and AI overviews in Google specifically over the past kind of 6 months or so have really taken a hold of people in SEO and marketers that really care about SEO too. Back before AI had really taken a hold of the market, we obviously had algorithm changes and shifts that would happen inside of search's algorithm, but we didn't have fundamental behavioral shifts that would really affect the way that people interact with search engine results pages and the way that they actually search and find information. The introduction of AI overviews inside of search and AI more broadly in terms of generative AI and large language models have really impacted the way that people find and gather information, and it has obviously had an impact in search and volumes and the way that people behave inside of search engines and what they're trying to get out of those tools. Again, you know, you would have to be living under a rock to have not seen some of the graphs going around about HubSpot's blog traffic. So if you did happen to miss it, HubSpot saw a huge drop in blog traffic over the last 12 months. About 80% of their blog traffic had gone when this graph was taken. I think it was January at some point. And, you know, that is a huge reflection of the changes that are happening in search. HubSpot themselves, you know, one of the biggest content powerhouses that are on the internet in terms of, you know, B2B topics, have lost 80% of their blog traffic. I mean, that's massive for SEO. It's absolutely huge. And when we see the likes of Kieran Flanagan kind of explain this, it does make sense. It puts things into picture about the way that they're evolving their marketing strategy, the way that they're adapting to the changes that are happening in search, and also the way that Google themselves are adapting to content that's being presented to them in search as well. So if you actually dig into what HubSpot lost, a lot of it is such broad stroke generic content that never ever related to what HubSpot offer anyway. So what HubSpot lose from that traffic in terms of monetary value and commercial outcomes is very minimal. So they're not going to be too bothered about losing 80% of irrelevant blog traffic. And, you know, Kieran Flanagan came out himself and said, we're actually changing our strategy to be way more specific and look ahead rather than try and optimize what's available now, actually anticipate the topics that are going to be big in 2 years' time and then get ahead of the curve basically and writing for those. The other interesting thing is around that whole HubSpot thing and the huge drop in blog traffic is their growth in branded search queries and their all-time high in terms of stock price. So not only have HubSpot, wowed investors by all of their data and metrics about the business, their branded search has gone up as well. So it's a really, really great example of how they're diversifying their channels. They're still being able to create demand extremely effectively and build their brand outside of search. So whilst they're losing blog traffic on irrelevant searches and irrelevant blogs that actually mean nothing for their business and do nothing for their business, they're able to create more effective demand that's more relevant to them in other channels too. And, you can see that in branded searches growing and also share prices being at an all-time high too. So being adaptable and changing in these circumstances is totally possible and something that I think we're all going to have to do going forwards. But that's not going to answer our question today, which is, should we still be investing in SEO? And we'll get to that. The other thing that's quite interesting is the shift in content consumption habits. And you'll typically see that B2B industries follow about 3 to 5 years behind B2C industries. And about 3 years ago, 3 to 5 years ago probably, there was this meteoric rise of short form content. Everybody wanted to create and consume short form video. About the time of lockdown, TikTok was hugely hyped up and everybody was creating short form content, and since then it's never gone away, and it's only increased in terms of reach and effectiveness ultimately at engaging buyers. And you've now started to see this move into B2B, where even B2B buyers are choosing to consume short form video content over longer form written content too. So you can kind of predict these cycles that are happening, because you just have to look at what's happening in B2C and think, okay, in about 3 to 5 years, this is, if it's a very common thing that's happening across all B2C brands and in all kind of industries and areas, this is likely going to come over to B2B at some point. And that's what we've seen with short form video content. So of course, we've had the content consumption changes. We've also had the diversification of search. So not only are people going to things like ChatGPT and Claude and all of these other different AIs to find answers to questions, they're also trusting search results less, ultimately. Because the system has been gamed for a number of years, you've been able to try and educate the market in a particular way using search, that buyers have become quite savvy to the information that they consume, and instead leverage things like their communities, word of mouth, social media, in order to actually do a lot of that research and evaluation of products and solutions. So they don't trust what your sales team is saying. They don't necessarily trust what you're saying in this blog content, for example, but they're trusting what their peers are saying. So a few things worth bearing in mind that have obviously impacted the way that we think about SEO and SEO's effectiveness and just the role of it and how that's changed in the market, because there's no doubt that it has changed, and we just need to ask ourselves basically, is SEO still worth investing in? So my answer to that question is yes. SEO is still worth investing in. Despite everything I just said, changes in search behavior, changes in content consumption, adaptations happening in search to include AI overviews, and the rise of AI and how people use generative content to get answers, I still think it's worth investing in SEO. The data tells me that SEO is still effective at bringing qualified buyers and qualified traffic to your website and converting them into pipeline and revenue. The data's there, and as long as the data continues to trend that way and the drop-off isn't so dramatic, it's really time to put all our eggs in another basket, there is still value in SEO. The interesting thing is, I think a lot of businesses will have seen drop-off in informational content that's covered in a lot of blog posts and pillar pages and things like that will have likely seen some drop off. maybe not in all cases. Our traffic, for example, has continued to grow over the last, 12, 24 months. We've actually had a huge increase in traffic because we've been way more intentional and particular about the blog content we create, the informational content we create, and how much it relates back to our business and our value proposition and everything else we see on our website. So our entire content strategy is very, very accurate at reflecting back our core message, and all of our topics are highly related to each other. So from, an algorithm perspective, all of our content works together to give us more authority on very particular things. What you'll likely see is, whilst there's been a drop-off in that kind of traffic, for most businesses, not all, those that have been continuing to, produce relevant content effectively, probably, have mitigated that drop-off to some extent. Commercial queries and money keywords, I've heard that phrase used as well, have continued to either sustain the level of traffic they're bringing to websites or grow in a lot of cases. And this is because commercial keywords and using search to actually find products and services hasn't been hugely impacted by AI. AI can't be trusted in a lot of cases in huge B2B purchases. When you're talking tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands, you're not going to trust an AI response as much as you're going to trust your own research and evaluation process to look at these websites, to analyze the features and the benefits that you're getting from them, to tell you what's the best, to analyze the pricing yourself and see what the package options are. Are you going to trust an AI to do that, to make that huge decision for your business and potentially impact you and your team and the ROI that you get from that tool and how it's implemented? Or are you going to trust yourself and your own experience and what you know about your particular scenario now? Of course, that one. Of course, the latter. AI has its place in terms of informational content being served to you quickly and answers that you can trust, because they're not going to have a huge fundamental impact on your business. However, choosing the wrong software or service or solution can have a huge negative impact on your business. If you get it wrong, sometimes there's no going back for 12 months because you're locked in, and then that's a huge expense to the business. So what you'll see is commercial traffic is still really great, and you're still able to capture buyers in search because they need to do the education for themselves. They need to make that visit to your website and spend time reviewing exactly what you do. So in that instance, that's a lot of the reason why I say SEO is still worth investing in, because you have to be producing that content, producing the blog content, the informational content, in order to actually rank better for those commercial keywords. Remember, SEO is like a pyramid. So you've got your commercial pages, your homepage, all of your high value pages at the top of the tree. And then as you work your way down, you've got things like blog content, pillar pages, all of these other informational content pieces, which work together, internally linked all the way back up to your commercial pages, like, product, services, homepage, in order to rank those more effectively. All of that internal linking is basically saying to Google, these pages are all relevant for these particular keywords, these particular commercial keywords, so rank them higher and give them more prominence in search results. The question I've heard recently is that we're a startup, we've been in business about 5 years now, we haven't really paid much attention to SEO, but we've been building our brand through events and create and demand, word of mouth, those sorts of things. The things you would expect from a startup, basically. A lot of business comes from word of mouth and those connections that you have before you go into business. So the question is there, should we now look to invest in SEO? We've been neglecting it for 5 years. We've heard that it's losing its effectiveness. Not many people are using search anymore. AI. People actually want to use communities in order to, find value and find products and solutions. Should we even consider SEO as part of our marketing mix? Again, my answer to that is yes. Until SEO and search statistically shows to have a hugely diminishing impact on a wide range of businesses, it's still definitely worth investing in. And so many businesses like that who have never put any effort into SEO have a huge runway ahead of them in terms of what's possible. If you're not getting hardly any traffic from queries outside of your brand, you have a huge opportunity right there, especially in niche areas. And this is probably what I'd advise in a lot of cases. So those brands that are startups, that are competing with larger brands who have been investing in SEO for 10 plus years, you're going to have a hard time competing against those head to head straight away. So a lot of success will come from niching down and looking to target particular areas of those commercial keywords. So, you know, choosing a particular industry or vertical, or a particular benefit that you want to go after, a particular feature that you can really hone in on, and being very deliberate about how you optimize your website for commercial keywords that are very, very niche. That will give you the best chance possible at building high value traffic to your website without a huge lift in terms of content creation and building domain authority and backlinks and all of that stuff you need to be able to do in order to compete at the top level in terms of high volume, high competition keywords, because you're not going to be able to do that straight away. So you need to look at other ways to bring that high value commercial keyword, money keyword traffic to your website, because that's where the gold is ultimately. You know, getting blog traffic is brilliant, and Google has different categories for how it tiers content and the link equity within those pieces of content. So the more traffic your page gets, the more equity the links have internally and externally too. So having blog content with high traffic is great, because then the internal links that you have and the external links that you have too will give off more equity. So that is really important. But ultimately, you want to be getting more people to your commercial pages, because they are the buyers that are ready to buy. They're evaluating solutions. They're looking to talk to sales. They're looking for demos. They're looking to take a trial. So getting that kind of traffic to your website will be far better for ROI than just producing endless amounts of blog content that actually don't relate closely to your business or give you the commercial keyword value in other areas of your website, because that's what we're working towards here. It's the commercial keywords, it's the money keywords that are going to bring in high intent buyers to your website that are ready to buy, that are ready to research and evaluate at least, and those that will convert at a much higher rate. So the one caveat I'll make to all of this is that diversification is absolutely crucial right now. SEO, of course, should be a fundamental part of your marketing strategy, but it should not be the cornerstone thing that everything else is focused around. It should just be a fundamental part and a key part that brings in high quality traffic to your website that converts into pipeline and revenue at a really attractive rate, but it can no longer be the cornerstone. It simply can't, because the way that buyer preferences and buyer behavior is changing and evolving, and the way that technology is evolving too, are both currently going against SEO. They're working against its effectiveness to, you know, bring lots of traffic to your website that you can then convert ultimately into buyers. It's working against it. The technology that's being evolved is drawing people away from search. I'm talking AI here, to search and get information in other ways outside of results pages, and getting that information directly in a chat window, as opposed to clicking on 10 blue links to research and evaluate something. And the way that buyer preferences for evaluation and trust are also evolving, and have evolved already, really. The way that they want to gather information is really interesting, like leaning on communities and peer-to-peer connections a lot more. Has come out in research from Winter even recently, looking at the way that CMOs buy SaaS, and I think CFOs as well are in a similar boat, that referrals are very important, and trusting peers is way easier than trusting salespeople ultimately who are trying to sell a product to you in a very biased way ultimately. So that's all changing, and your marketing strategy needs to be able to adapt to these changes too, and you need to be able to identify the channels that your buyers are using to educate themselves, to research and evaluate products and services. And if that's not SEO, and you can identify sooner rather than later what those channels are, and have mind share in your market and be in the places where they're consuming content and where they're educating themselves, ultimately, that's what's going to make you win. And SEO, for the time being, will continue to be that channel. Its effectiveness, seems to be diminishing over time, but we're not there yet. And as long as we're not there, and, in 5 years' time, we might sit down again and say, we're still not there. Okay, well, let's keep going then. I'm looking at the data and seeing that we and most of our clients are still getting huge amounts of traffic and huge amounts of high intent conversions from search every single day, that it's telling me that it's not yet at the point of diminishing return, that we shouldn't be scared to carry on investing in SEO. We can see on the horizon that it might not always be as effective as it is now, but for the time being, if you were to reposition budget, investment and time and resource elsewhere right now, I think a lot of businesses would lose out overall, because SEO, for the time being, for the next 1 to 2 years at least, continue to review all that time, maybe even up to 5 years, it's still going to be extremely effective. Like, Google cannot fundamentally change the way that their search operates, because businesses still use PPC. They've still got this mutual relationship with businesses that produce content to power their search engine. So some serious societal changes and behavior changes need to take place before any sort of revolutionary search experience comes out. So I'm not worried about continuing to invest in SEO. I don't think you should be either. Just have it part of a marketing mix ultimately. And I really hate that phrase, because it kind of sounds like old-fashioned and we should be everywhere at once. But it's healthy, and healthier than ever, to diversify what you're doing and not have SEO baked into the cornerstone and be, the fundamental piece of the puzzle. The other thing to mention here is the rise of, social content and thought leadership within content distribution and content creation, because SEO has been a really good way to hide those people in your business that aren't particularly, confident or outwardly facing in the market, like a really good person to be educated by and a really interesting person to follow. SEO's been able to kind of capture their thoughts and distribute it in a way that doesn't require loads of charisma and really engaging personalities. But that's changing, especially with the rise of short form video, like we've spoken about again. Those kind of things are what buyers are looking for. And if that's the way that they want to consume content, you'll probably need to figure out a way to get that too. It might not be your CEO. It might not be your product director. It might be somebody else in the business that has to be your kind of leading person, your voice in the market, the person that's going to get your business's point of view and the benefits out there into the minds of your audience, and capture their attention in feeds. Yeah, it's a tricky one, because now all of a sudden the content game has evolved from just being words and well crafted written messages into actually how do we appear as personalities almost, and how do we actually come across really charismatic and engage an audience in completely different formats that we've never used or thought about before. So yeah, I'd definitely recommend businesses to start thinking about who those kind of people are that they want to be showcasing in the business, and those kind of the people that can best deliver their message to the market in these new formats like video and audio. I say new formats, they're not even new now. They're actually really old. So, but how you can best deliver that to the market is going to be really important going forwards. So important to think about that. So let's wrap it up there. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Demand Decoded. Sorry if it is a little bit rambly, but hopefully you were able to take some insight from there and apply it to your strategy for the rest of 2025 and beyond. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time. Bye, everyone.